My guest today is Loyce Pace, the new regional director, IFRC regional director for the Americas, who just joined IFRC. Welcome, Loyce.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Before coming to the IFRC, you served as Assistant Secretary for Global Affairs at the United States Department of Health and Human Services. And before that, you had a long career in public health and community health. What was it that made you want to join IFRC?
Oh, goodness. I think it really comes down to being able to do the work where it happens and with the people who are making it happen. IFRC and its network of member societies and partners. It's just truly incredible how we're able to be so effective and present at a local level. And I think, particularly after having worked at a global level for a number of years, I was really keen to come back home, essentially, to the community.
You've worked in diplomacy for a long time, so you're obviously comfortable in that. We talk about humanitarian diplomacy. What do you think specifically you will bring to this job in that respect?
Thank you for asking that, because one of the reasons I ended up in diplomacy is because, having worked at the community level for a number of years, I saw that there were champions and people really doing hard work and doing it successfully until they perhaps hit a ceiling. And the ceiling was not something that they had put on themselves as a barrier, but was really more systemic. And it was really, when we sort of unpacked it often, was a policy or some other systemic barrier that would keep good people from doing good work. And so, what I'm hoping to do in this role as regional director of the Americas is really look to ways that I can open spaces for volunteers all over the world, for national society leadership, to again do what they are designed to do, which is help people in their communities. It's less about where we show up or I show up personally, but there's this sort of soft hand or voice of diplomacy that can be quite effective in opening those doors or those pathways so that people can focus on the work and not on overcoming those types of obstacles.
So you'll be the regional director for the Americas, but you have experience with working with community-based and grassroots organizations across Africa and Asia. How do you think that can translate to your work in the Americas?
Well, I hope first and foremost, I can lean on my counterparts, my peers, other regional directors who are leading in those areas, those parts of the world, to share what we're experiencing. One thing I found covering a couple of different regions simultaneously previously is how much common ground there is when it comes to the work to be done, for sure, but also when it comes to the innovations that people develop and the ways that people approach the work. Of course, it's never one size fits all, not with countries or communities or companies, but the reality is the world has shared problems. And that's true from a global level to a regional level to a national or local level. And so it's my hope that in working in the region, I can connect some of those dots. One of the things that we are exploring, for example, or I think we would be able to explore, is a stronger relationship between CARICOM and the African Union, and building on what has already been established by those two political bodies, really asking, okay, well, what are the ways that IFRC and its members can piggyback on that arrangement or partnership? And I think we see that across the diaspora, honestly, this interest in how countries across the so-called global South can come together.
Specifically, when we look at the thematic areas in which you worked, you've done a lot of work in health related to health emergencies.
Mhm.
For example, you've held a number of key roles for the United States on the Global Health Council, the COVID 19 Advisory Board. What do you see as the biggest challenges facing global health right now? And how do we need to respond as IFRC?
That is a very tricky question, but it's an important one. Of course, given my background in public health, I feel very strongly about health being a pathway and even an important foundation for human development. When it comes to the biggest problems, I guess I would think about this in terms of our region. And I think about something like dengue and what the region was facing in the past year or so, knowing how many people were affected and people not just in cities, but in remote areas. And so, how we approach that type of work, should we have another similar outbreak in the region, is going to be important. But we can't forget that even in the US, we have some of these challenges, and you have measles outbreaks
Mhm.
now in a country that hasn't had to deal with this issue on this scale for some time and could pose a great risk not only for Americans, but for others across the region. And so we have to keep our eye on a few different balls when it comes to health, including the intersection of health, human health, and environmental health. And I think we see that with something like avian influenza. Again, something that we've been tracking for some time, including when I was in government. But importantly, now, as I'm going to be able to step into this role, working more closely with across governments, of course, but with communities, really understanding the role that communities can play in identifying these potential problems and, of course, responding to them if they arise.
Technology, of course, we all know has pros and cons. In this respect, how should we be thinking and acting to prepare for health challenges 20 years from now?
Oh, wow. Yeah, 20 years out. Goodness. Everyone is talking about artificial intelligence now. And to your point of there being pros and cons or benefits and disadvantages, I think that an organization like IFRC and the people that we pull together have a great opportunity to inform those innovations in a way that is ethical. Because we can have all of the technology in the world, but if it's applied in ways that are potentially harmful, then we know where that leads us. So I'm excited about working with IFRC because I know that the ways that we've used information technology previously has been quite powerful in forecasting or predicting certain disasters or crises, right? Whether that's the movement of people um, or the impact of an earthquake or fire or flood, right? Let alone sounding the alarm or alert so that people are not as affected. But there are other really important ways that we can think about technologies and in particular AI, especially when it comes to how we arm people with information and both address a person's individual needs regarding ideally their own data, but how we compile or collect that data to be even more powerful and to allow us to be ahead of the curve with our work. That to me is the most important thing that we can do with information technology, not even in the next 20 years, but the next two,
Mhm.
is to really harness that power. And that's not something we can do alone, nor should we. That will require a strong partnership with both the public and private sector. And that to me is another exciting development, is to ensure that as those actors are looking to this technology and how this
Mhm.
technology could allow us all to flourish, that we come in with this really important humanitarian application of that
Mhm.
innovation so that it works for all.
And that data collection is important for all the issues that we're dealing with, including migration.
Mhm.
And we know that that is an issue that keeps coming up when we talk about the Americas.
Right.
And many national societies across the continent are working in many different ways to help people on the move.
Mhm.
You're still fairly new to the
Yes.
IFRC, a couple of weeks old, and not sure if it has been 2 weeks, 1 week, right? But do you have a sense of how the IFRC network needs to address this issue going forward or at this moment?
Yeah. No, it's a pretty important moment, and people have always been on the move. We know that, and we also know, because the data show us, that people will continue to be on the move, and those numbers are only climbing. I think what's really important for us in our region is continuing to show up for people and meet them where they are, wherever they are. They are moving in all sorts of directions, and we know that. And we know that uh, wherever they are in this journey of migration, for whatever reason they're on the move, we have a responsibility, and even some might say an obligation, according to our mandate, to ensure that they are met with support and dignity as part of that journey.
Mhm.
But it's increasingly important and perhaps increasingly complicated that we look closely at what their needs are, these people who are on the move, particularly when we consider uh, individuals who are far away from their country of origin. In the Americas, we have migrants who are not from the Americas. And that is a special circumstance, right? Because already you have sort of a confluence, if not a clash, of communities in this one grouping when we think about um, some aspect of migration in our region. And then you add on people who
Mhm.
don't even share that common experience with folks from that part of the world, and who might feel even more isolated and perhaps be even more vulnerable for that reason. So
Mhm.
I'm looking forward to working with the team on how we we really address this sort of issue in a time such as this.
So we talked about health
Yes.
and migration.
Sure.
What about disaster preparedness and coordination as we respond to a growing number of climate related events? Tropical storms,
Hmm.
wildfires,
Right.
flooding.
All things we're dealing with in the Americas, that's for sure, unfortunately.
So it seems that everyone in all sectors, not just
Yeah.
ours, needs to up their game in a way to be ready in response to these challenges.
Yeah.
What can we do in that respect? How can we up our game?
Yeah, well, I think one way, and this is something we're arguably doing to some degree, but really, first of all, recognizing that these are no longer anomalies. I think there was a time in recent memory where we said, "Well, goodness, it's so strange that we have all of these storms. It's so strange that we have all of these fires. It's so strange," and of course it is, and it's not
Mhm.
just strange; it's tragic. And yet, it feels as though this trend is here to stay. And so I think rather than expecting this prolonged calm or respite from these disasters, unfortunately, we need to be that much more ready for this cycle of disasters in whatever form. I think also the more we consider the relationship between particularly natural disasters and these other pillars of migration, of health, I think that only makes us stronger, because the reality is people are experiencing all of these issues and more at the same time. And I think we've done well in the humanitarian or development space to be quite focused in one or more of these priorities in a way that, again, is providing people with what they need. But now is the time to take this very focused, tailored, expert approach to that work in one stream or pillar, and really be clear about the connections to other pillars. So considering how we could be that much more cross-cutting, and sort of use increasingly limited resources, unfortunately, to lift all boats, as one might say. And I'm thinking in particular about, a small national society, um, anywhere in our region, who is trying to do both and, as we say in English sometimes, which is, they're dealing with a sort of natural hazard or disaster. At the same time, they're trying to address the needs of people who are fleeing said disaster. At the same time, there's perhaps an outbreak or a potential for, some other health poor health conditions, as a result of the environments in which people are living. Again, it's sort of all conflated and compounded in a way that we have to be ready to address. Otherwise, we'll always feel like we're behind.
So many challenges.
Yeah, a few.
Are there any opportunities that we could see in all of this?
I think so. I think absolutely. It's one of the things I'm looking forward to most in this role is coming in at a time that does feel difficult. And the other thing I'm looking forward to probably most is, as I mentioned earlier, really getting back to the people, on the ground and in communities, and being able to lift up the work that they're doing already. People always find a way, and they are creative and they are determined. And I think, especially now, um, presents this opportunity for people to meet the moment and to do what they've always done, which is to look out for one another, even if no one else is there. But I don't believe everyone will fall away either. And I actually not just hope, but I sense that there will be more actors and institutions that come in, to fill the space that perhaps is opening up for them. And I think the onus is on people like you and me to present these opportunities to these new actors, right? Who say, I didn't know that we had so much to lose.
Yeah.
That there were so many people committed to this work. And now they have an awareness. And we can take advantage of that awareness and that interest, right? In a way that is beneficial to all parties. I think everyone gains when they're able to demonstrate their core humanity. And I'm really excited about that.
On that positive note, let us look at your background a little bit, if that's okay.
Sure.
I'm told you studied human biology at Stanford University in California, and then you went on to earn a master's degree in international health and human rights at the Bloomberg School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins in Maryland. What is human biology? And how does it connect to international health and human rights? And how has that served you in your career? And how will it serve you and us when you start really on the ground in your new role?
So you mean, why did I bother with all of this schooling? And so human biology is interesting, because I think it was my undergraduate university's way of helping those of us with scientific minds also tap into our social side. So at Stanford, I was able to not only be on this sort of pre-med track and really dig into what I loved about the biological sciences, but also study psychology and social services and even health policy, right? So I guess the softer side of science. It gave me a really holistic view and, frankly, some experience with how I wanted to approach health and wellness, or well-being. And that was sort of my segue into my graduate program as well, which I did take some time off because I wasn't quite sure what to do with my human biology degree, especially once I decided not to be a physician. And that was a big decision because I recognized that I was really built to help whoever I could, not just one person at a time, but as they say at Hopkins, millions at a time. And so I was drawn to this more community health work. And, you know, I could have stopped there, but I was very interested also in social justice and human rights. And I think that was rooted in my own experience as someone who has my profile and is someone who has, if we look at the scientific data, has a very different experience and with public health and in at least in the US healthcare system. And I know that this is a trend globally as well, for women, for people of color. And so I was very keen to not only think about, again, that sort of basic social service, but more broadly, how the system could be designed or repaired to make that easier.
And at some point, you were also a teacher.
I was.
What was that like?
I loved it, actually. I loved the classroom. I hated grading. So
Oh.
it's one of the reasons I'm not a teacher
Were you a
anymore.
hard grader?
I was actually a hard grader. So I think my students also hated my grading. But I loved mentoring. I loved lesson planning. And I really liked, for the time that I was able to do it, I like seeing this progression, right? From questioning minds to clear thinking and opinions about something. It's something I would do again. And in fact, when I get a chance, I whenever I'm invited to lecture or speak to a class or in a course, I often say yes.
Was there someone in your life that influenced you or mentored you?
Oh my gosh. Oh yeah, plenty of people. You know, I really have a lot of respect for the former Secretary General, actually, of IFRC. I consider him a mentor, Asi, and as someone to whom I looked up during his time in the role, and who I came to appreciate for his leadership, not just within the organization, but outside of the organization. And I'd like to I know a lot of people were touched by him, and it seems as though his legacy lives on through leadership today. But very personally, just seeing an African leader in particular take the reins of the organization and sort of help shine a light on the work that we do is something that I'm grateful to have witnessed. But importantly, I'm also grateful that he was willing to take me under his wing to some degree and pave the way for those of us who are coming afterwards.
Outside of work.
Is there an outside of work? Yes, there is.
Is there? Do you believe in work-life balance?
I do.
And
much.
what do you do for fun?
Okay, so I can answer this in a couple different ways. So first off, yes, I absolutely believe in work-life balance. And I hope if my team is listening to this, they believe me. I do believe in work-life balance. And it's actually quite important. So one of the things I do is I observe Sabbath. And I'm quite serious about it. It's very important to me that at least one day a week, I take time for myself, for self-reflection, but for time with my family, friends, and broader community. And I think especially now that I'm leaving some of those people behind in this new role, it's going to be very important that I take that time and space. And I partly am joining IFRC in hopes that everyone sort of honors and respects that. And I certainly expect my team to think about the things they need as well. Fun. What do I do for fun? Well, it's not so secret anymore that I sing.
Oh.
Don't ask me to sing now. I am not a soloist, but I've been performing for a number of years, and it's something that I kept up even in my busiest times. It was really important to me, and I give credit to my partner who encouraged me to not let it fall by the wayside. But I have a beautiful community that of which I'm a part, and including a small group of women with whom I regularly perform, or I have done so up until this point. And that's given me a lot of joy and self-care, I think, and also given me a sense of purpose beyond my job. Because, like you said, we're not just
Hmm.
who we are between the hours of 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. in the case of some jobs,
Yes.
but who I am in other evenings when I'm free or on the weekends. I consider it a sort of ministry, even how we connect with our audiences,
Mhm.
connect with people through our art and through the love that we're showing and sharing in that space. It's really quite powerful.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that with
Cool.
us. And mental note to remember to ask you to sing when an opportunity comes up.
Only in karaoke settings. That's fine.
We always ask our guests
Mhm.
to bring an object
Mm.
that has some personal meaning to them. What did you bring? Could you show us and
I
talk about
could.
it?
Yes, I absolutely can. Now, mindful that I am just in town in Geneva for the week, or actually, I guess 2 weeks. But I traveled with this pin that a former colleague, a dear colleague, gave to me, and it says "Show Up." And I like it because it reminds me how I want to be in these spaces, to show up, to stand up, to speak out for people who might not have the microphone, might not have a seat at that table, might not feel they can use the voice that they have. Um, that's that's who I want to be in the world. Someone who shows up, but then who importantly makes space for the issues or the individuals or institutions that deserve to be out front. And so showing up isn't just taking up that space for myself, right? Um, but it's making sure that people remember
Mhm.
the folks that are too often forgotten.
At the end of the day, with everything that's going on in the world,
Mm-hmm.
what or who inspires you, gives you hope, or
Mm.
maybe brings you comfort besides your singing?
Yeah. I think it's the people around the world who I know, who I connect with as global citizens. I'm just really excited to be a part of this global community through IFRC because it taps this belief that I have that we truly are all connected through our common humanity and our shared humanity and our shared experience as humans in this great big world of ours, no matter where we are. So it's not one person or one thing. I think it's our
Mhm.
shared existence, actually, which sounds, um, it might sound a certain type of way because it's very ethereal and hopeful. But that's me too. I'm a big idealist, and I know the world has a lot of problems. I know people butt heads. I know that not everyone gets along all the ways all the time. But I am always going to work to tap into the core of who I think we are, who I think we can be. And not everyone will come along on that journey with me. Not everyone will meet me where I am or, take my hand when I reach out. But I will always try, always.
The name of the podcast is Red Vest.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure that you've had the opportunity just yet to wear one. But what does it mean to you? What, in your view, it symbolizes?
I actually think it means showing up. It's one of the things I like about what I brought, even and how connected it feels to our mission. Someone's donning that vest and they've made a choice and a commitment to show up wherever they're needed at any time, anyhow, for whoever, requires that support, who has that need. That's the red vest to me. And gosh, I mean, I'm just so grateful that people are still wearing it and people are still reaching for it, and people can still see it in the distance and feel that hope that comes up for them because of us being there.
Well, I look forward to you showing up and wearing one very soon.
Me too.
And thank you for sharing your expertise and insights with our audience and for allowing us to get to know you a little bit.
Thank you, Sasha. Appreciate it.